Ellen DeGeneres had hosted thousands of episodes over her career, interviewing everyone from A-list celebrities to inspiring everyday heroes. But she never expected that a routine feel-good segment would turn into one of the most emotionally challenging moments of her hosting experience. What started as a simple story about community service became a raw, unfiltered glimpse into human struggle that left Ellen questioning everything she thought she knew about putting on a brave face. It was a Wednesday afternoon at the Ellen Studios, and the atmosphere was relaxed and upbeat as they prepared for what the production team had scheduled as a lighter episode. Ellen, wearing a cheerful turquoise blazer over white jeans, was looking forward to featuring some positive community stories after a week of heavier news cycles. The segment was supposed to be straightforward, highlight local heroes making a difference in their communities, share some laughs, maybe give away some prizes, and send everyone home feeling good about humanity. Today we're celebrating people who make their communities better just by showing up and caring, Ellen announced to the enthusiastic studio audience. Our next guest runs a community food bank that has fed over 10,000 families in the past year. Please welcome Maria Santos from Phoenix, Arizona. The audience erupted in warm applause as Maria walked onto the stage. She was a woman in her early 40s with kind eyes and a reserved demeanor, wearing a simple navy dress that suggested she had dressed up for this special occasion. Her movements were careful and deliberate, and Ellen noticed immediately that she seemed more nervous than most guests, gripping her hands together as she approached the interview area. Maria had been selected for the show after a local news station featured her food bank, highlighting how she had single-handedly turned an abandoned warehouse into a thriving community resource center. On paper, her story was exactly the kind of uplifting content Ellen loved to feature, someone making a real difference through dedication and hard work. "Maria, welcome to the show," Ellen said warmly, embracing her guest before they both sat down. "Thank you for having me, Ellen." "This is surreal," Maria replied, her voice carrying a slight tremor that Ellen attributed to normal stage nerves. "So tell us about your food bank. How did this all get started?" Ellen asked, settling into what she expected would be a straightforward interview about community service and giving back. Maria's face brightened slightly as she began describing her work. "Well, I started the Phoenix Community Food Bank 3 years ago in an old warehouse that was just sitting empty. We serve about 300 families every week now, and we've expanded to include job training programs and after-school tutoring for kids." "That's incredible, Maria. What inspired you to start this? Was it always a dream of yours to run a food bank?" Ellen asked, genuinely interested in Maria's motivation. "Actually, no," Maria said, her smile faltering almost imperceptibly. "I never planned to do anything like this. She paused, and Ellen noticed her hands beginning to shake slightly. "I just knew what it felt like to be hungry." Ellen leaned forward, sensing there was more to this story. "What do you mean?" Maria looked down at her hands for a moment, then back up at Ellen. Something in her expression had shifted, becoming more vulnerable and uncertain. "Ellen, can I tell you something that I've never told anyone publicly?" Ellen felt a slight chill run down her spine. In all her years of hosting, she had learned to recognize the moments when an interview was about to take an unexpected turn. "Of course, Maria, whatever you're comfortable sharing." Maria took a deep breath, and when she spoke again, her voice was quieter but steadier. "The reason I started the food bank is because 5 years ago, I was living in my car with my 2 children." The studio fell completely silent. Ellen's expression shifted from casual interest to genuine concern as she processed what Maria had just revealed. This wasn't the inspiring backstory she had expected to hear. "We lost our home when my husband left us with nothing but debt," Maria continued, her voice growing stronger as she spoke. "I was working 2 jobs, but it wasn't enough. For 8 months we lived in a 2004 Honda Civic, parking behind different stores at night, trying to keep my kids fed and in school without anyone knowing." Ellen felt her chest tighten as she listened. This was not the uplifting community service story that had been outlined in her notes. This was something much more raw and personal, and she wasn't sure how to navigate it on live television. "Maria," Ellen said softly, That must have been incredibly difficult. How did you manage? Barely, Maria admitted, tears beginning to form in her eyes. There were nights when I would give my kids the last of our food and tell them I had already eaten. I would drive to different food banks and churches, always terrified that someone would recognize us, that my kids would be taken away from me. The audience was completely silent now, and Ellen could feel the weight of Maria's story settling over the studio like a heavy blanket. She glanced toward her producers, unsure whether to continue down this path or try to steer the conversation back to safer territory. But you survived, Ellen said gently, making the decision to stay present with Maria rather than deflect. You and your children got through it. We did, Maria nodded, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. But Ellen, I need to tell you something else. Something I've been carrying for 3 years now. Ellen's heart rate quickened. She had no idea where this was heading, but she could see that Maria needed to say whatever she was about to say. The food bank, all the work I do, it's not just about helping people, Maria said, her voice beginning to break. It's because I feel guilty every single day that we made it out when so many families don't. Ellen felt tears forming in her own eyes as she watched this woman unravel in front of her. Maria, why do you feel guilty about surviving? Because I see families come to my food bank who are exactly where I was 5 years ago, and I know that some of them won't make it, Maria said, her composure completely gone now. I know that some of those kids will end up in foster care, some of those parents will give up hope, and I can't save them all. Ellen stood up without thinking, and moved to sit beside Maria on the couch, taking her hands. Maria, look at me. You're not responsible for saving everyone. What you're doing is incredible, but it's not enough, Maria sobbed. Ellen, I lie awake at night thinking about the families I couldn't help, the ones who fell through the cracks. I've been pretending to be this strong community leader, but the truth is, I'm still that scared woman living in her car, just trying to make sure no one else has to feel that alone. Ellen felt the full weight of the moment settling on her shoulders. This was no longer a feel-good interview about community service. This was a woman having a breakdown on national television, and Ellen realized that behind all of Maria's success was someone carrying an enormous burden of survivor's guilt and unprocessed trauma. Maria, Ellen said, her voice thick with emotion, have you talked to anyone about these feelings? A counselor or therapist? Maria shook her head. I can't afford therapy, and besides, who am I to complain? I have a home now. My kids are doing well in school. I'm helping people. I should be grateful, not falling apart. Ellen looked out at the audience, many of whom were crying along with Maria. She made a decision that went against every protocol of daytime television. We're going to take a break, Ellen announced to the cameras, but we'll be right back. During the commercial break, Ellen stayed beside Maria, holding her hand and speaking quietly. Maria, what you're feeling is called survivor's guilt, and it's more common than you think. You're not broken, and you're not ungrateful. You're human. I'm sorry, Maria whispered. I didn't mean to do this on your show. I was just supposed to talk about the food bank. Don't apologize, Ellen said firmly. Sometimes the most important conversations are the ones we don't plan to have. When they returned from commercial, Ellen had made a decision about how to handle the remainder of the interview. We're back with Maria Santos, who runs the Phoenix Community Food Bank, Ellen said to the camera. Maria, before the break, you shared something very personal with us about your own experience with homelessness and the feelings you carry about your work. Maria nodded, looking more composed but still fragile. I did. I'm not sure why I said all that. I think you said it because you needed to. Ellen replied, and I think there are probably people watching right now who needed to hear it. Maria, can I ask you something? Of course. When you were living in your car with your children, what would have meant the most to you? What would have helped? Maria thought for a moment. Honestly, just knowing that someone saw me as a person, not just a problem to be solved. When you're in that situation, you become invisible. People look right through you. Ellen nodded. And now, through your food bank, you're making sure that other families feel seen. I try to, Maria said. But Ellen, I still feel like I'm not doing enough. I still feel like that scared woman sometimes. Ellen turned to face the camera directly. You know what, folks? I think Maria just taught us something really important. We spend so much time celebrating people who overcome adversity, but we don't talk enough about the fact that healing isn't linear. Success doesn't erase trauma, and sometimes the people who are helping others the most are the ones who are still struggling with their own pain. She turned back to Maria. Maria, you said you feel guilty about surviving, but can I tell you what I see? I see someone who took the worst experience of her life and turned it into a lifeline for other people. That's not something to feel guilty about. That's heroic. It doesn't feel heroic, Maria said quietly. I bet it doesn't. Ellen agreed. But here's what I want you to know. First, I'm going to connect you with some resources for trauma counseling because you deserve to heal from what you went through. And second, I want to help expand your food bank. Ellen reached into her blazer pocket and pulled out a card. This is a check for $100,000 to help you serve more families. But more than that, I want to help you build a support network for yourself, because you can't pour from an empty cup. Maria stared at the check in disbelief. Ellen, I can't accept this. There are so many other people who need help more than I do. Maria, stop, Ellen said gently but firmly. This is exactly what I'm talking about. You're so focused on everyone else's needs that you can't accept help for yourself. But here's the thing. If you don't take care of yourself, you can't take care of anyone else. Ellen addressed the audience. How many of you know someone like Maria? Someone who gives everything to others but can't accept help for themselves. Someone who survived something difficult but feels guilty about it. Hands throughout the audience went up, and Ellen nodded. That's what I thought. Maria, you're not alone in feeling this way, and the fact that you're brave enough to talk about it on television means you're giving other people permission to acknowledge their own struggles. Maria looked around the studio, taking in the faces of audience members who were nodding and wiping their eyes. I just want people to know that it's okay to not be okay, even when you're supposed to be the strong one. That's exactly right, Ellen said. And Maria, I want you to know something else. The work you're doing at the food bank isn't just about the food. You're showing people that someone cares, that they matter, that they're seen. That's what you needed when you were in their situation, and that's what you're giving them now. Ellen turned to the camera one final time. You know, we brought Maria on the show today to celebrate her community service, and we're definitely doing that. But what we're really celebrating is her honesty, her vulnerability, and her willingness to keep showing up for people even when she's struggling herself. She looked back at Maria. That's real strength, Maria. Not the kind that pretends everything is fine, but the kind that says, I'm hurting, but I'm not giving up. The segment ended with Ellen and Maria embracing, but the impact of their conversation continued long after the cameras stopped rolling. The show received thousands of messages from viewers sharing their own experiences with survivors' guilt, financial hardship, and the challenge of helping others while struggling themselves. 6 months later, Maria returned to the show to provide an update. The Phoenix Community Food Bank had expanded to serve 800 families per week, and Maria had established a peer support group for other service providers dealing with secondary trauma and survivors' guilt. Ellen, I want to thank you for letting me fall apart on your show, Maria said during her return visit. It was terrifying, but it was also the beginning of my real healing. How are you doing now? Ellen asked. Better, Maria said honestly. Not perfect, but better. I'm in therapy, I have a support network, and I've learned that it's okay to be both grateful for my survival and sad about what I lost. Those feelings can coexist, Ellen smiled. And the food bank, thriving. But more importantly, we're not just feeding bodies anymore. We're feeding souls. We're creating a community where people can be honest about their struggles without shame. The episode became one of Ellen's most discussed segments, not because of any celebrity cameos or elaborate surprises, but because it showed what happens when someone drops their guard completely and reveals the complex truth behind their public persona. Ellen often said that Maria's interview taught her the importance of holding space for difficult emotions, even in a format designed for entertainment. Sometimes the most important thing we can do is just witness someone's pain and let them know they're not alone, Ellen reflected. Because sometimes the most powerful moments on television happen when someone stops trying to be inspiring and starts being honest. And sometimes the people who spend their lives helping others are the ones who most need to be reminded that they deserve help too.